Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Spotlight, where we shine a light on entrepreneurs, SMEs, and innovators. I'm Maxine Crow, your host, and I am delighted to be joined by Christian Harris, founder of Slip Safety Services. So, Christian and I, where did we actually meet, Christian?
I was wondering that, because we've known each other for loads of years, and I couldn't think
Yeah,
where we actually met. I think was it maybe one of the kind of This Week in FM networking events or something like
could
that,
have,
maybe in
it
London?
could have been. Yeah, it definitely could have been. And I know that were we on the same KPI actually as well?
We
We,
crossed over a bit, didn't we? I think I started a little bit before you, maybe 6 or 9 months before you.
yeah, I think we probably crossed over. Sarah from Plain Sailing Motivation says hi, morning,
Hi.
afternoon, even Sarah. Lovely
Yeah,
for you to join us on YouTube. So Christian, how are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, I had a relaxing holiday with my family to Lapland over New Year, and energized and back into it and pushing on to finish off the financial year well and move on and keep making a big impact in 2024.
That's great, and we're going to get to learn a bit more about that. First of all, for the audience, just introduce yourself and your business.
Sure. So I run a business, as you say, Maxine, called Slip Safety Services. We do what we say on the tin. Not many people know, but the leading cause of accidents, injuries, and insurance claims is slips, trips, and falls. Most people think that they are inevitable. Some people think they're a bit funny, but actually they're very costly and very serious. And we've developed a proven scientific approach to addressing that risk. Typically, where we work with clients to do that, they see at least a 57% reduction in incidents and costs, and we've helped several thousand sites to reduce their risk over the last few years. We partner up with insurers, some large FMs, lots of blue chip clients to drive down that risk. And I suppose my big goal is to, I can't say eradicate that problem because it's always going to be a problem, but to reduce the number of people suffering from that kind of incident by 500,000 a year across the world. That's kind of where I'm aiming.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. Let's just take ourselves back in time a little bit and just tell us a bit about what were the challenges when you started Slip Safety Services, and how have you, and what was a pivotal moment um, and turning point in your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, probably the most pivotal moment was before I started this business. So I'll share just that quick story with you, and then I'll get
Mm.
back into from a business perspective. So if you cast your mind back to 2012, in May 2012, it was the lead up to the London Olympics, and I live in London, and I lived in London then. So it was very, very excitement, sort of tangible excitement in the air, and everyone really expecting what was going to be happening there. Um, Sunday, the 13th of May, I woke up, had a bit of a lie in, and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and I decided to go to this place called Columbia Road Flower Market in East London. Bought some flowers, had some lunch, had a wander around by the canal, and so on and so forth, having a lovely, relaxing day. This was before marriage and kids, so life was much easier
Yeah.
on a weekend then. Started heading home, parked up our car in the Sainsbury's car park in Islington near Angel Tube, locked the car, turned around the corner to go and walk into the store, and you have to walk down the main sort of drag on the main road there. And basically then that was the last thing I remembered for 5-6 hours.
Wow.
A car had come around the corner too fast, lost control, mounted the curb, drove onto the pavement,
Oh
and
my
ploughed
God.
into me, and sort of knocked me over and caused lots and lots of injuries and damage. So that was probably the biggest turning point in my life, because that's what really gave me this passion for safety.
Yeah.
So since then, I've been really interested in making the world a safer place, because when you have that kind of experience yourself, it really brings it home to you, how much your life can be changed by something that you weren't expecting and wasn't your fault, and it has a
Yeah.
big sort of impact. So that's probably the biggest turning point from a personal perspective that has driven my career.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of the business, I would say the probably the most difficult period, and I'm sure others would have said the same, was during COVID. So we make our money by sending people out to do stuff on clients' sites. And sitting in December 19, we were thinking, everything was looking very positive for the first quarter of 2020. That was our second year of trading. So, first year of trading had been not difficult in that we expected it, but we definitely weren't profitable. Year two, we were thinking, okay, this is the way we're gonna get to our maybe break even, small profit in year two, and then push on from there. And just sort of seeing the everything, excuse the pun, slipping away in terms of work that was booked being postponed and then cancelled. And then I remember in April 2020 we invoiced 1,500 quid in the month.
Wow.
And it was like, wow, that is pretty difficult, worrying times. Thankfully it did kind of come back, so we continued to grow during that year, although it was very, very up and down. We had some months, but basically marrying up to the lockdowns. The lockdown times were next to nothing going on, and then there was this kind of explosive rebounding. So by June and July we were very busy again. But that was probably the scariest time, I would say.
Wow. How many people were working with you then as part of your team?
So not that many. So there were about 6 of us then. So it was not, compared to other large organizations, where they had hundreds of thousands of people. That's obviously different scale, but within, it's all relative, right? So within our context, that was very scary for us.
Yeah. So just in terms of that COVID and coming out of that, what innovative strategies did you implement to basically prepare yourself forward and to try and get the momentum going again with your business?
So I guess the answer to that predominantly lies in how we went about trying to generate more business, because the way that we kind of deliver our work hasn't fundamentally changed. We have added in some digital stuff since then, but I guess I really went hard into content on LinkedIn. I launched my own podcast, which I'd sort of dilly-dallied around and wondered when I'd ever do it. I wanted to do it, but just didn't do it. And so I did that. That was really great at raising my profile and getting opportunities to go and do talks. Really piled into doing Zoom sessions and webinars and all of that kind of stuff. And you mentioned KPI. I was doing KPI during this time, so really went into following the kind of strategies that they go through in that program, and really tried to maximize everything we could out of the 5 Ps in the KPI program. So that was really the response, was to sort of double down on raising my own profile, trying to scale up the impact we were having, and getting known by more and more people. And that has reaped its rewards. The challenge for us with what we do is that whilst the problem of slips, trips and falls, like I said, is the biggest cause of accidents, injuries and claims, it's one of these things that people kind of sleep on a little bit. So everyone sort of knows it's there, but it's not often, number one on the list. So in terms of making the impact that we need to make, the strategy really has been to get known by as wide a circle of people as we can in the safety and the FM world, because we know that if 100,000 people know who we are, then a small proportion of those is a big number that will be looking at the problem actively. Whereas if you're only known by 10 people, then there's a good chance that none of them are actually looking at it actively.
Yeah. So when you talk about the visibility, raising of profile, you've got a methodology, haven't you, for slip safety? Do you want to just talk about that and just share that with us?
Yeah, so I suppose there are 6 kind of key principles that we talk about, which are the 6 reasons why somebody might slip. So when everybody's aware that it's a problem, and most people assume, okay, well it's because somebody wasn't paying attention or the floor was wet, and they kind of leave it at that. There's actually quite a lot more to it than that. So we talk about this model called CHIMES, which are the 6 reasons. So there's contamination. So that's what's on the floor. A clean and a dry floor won't be slippery, but if you introduce some contamination, it might be more slippery. H is for heel, so that's all about the footwear. I is for individual, so that is the human factors, pushing, pulling, twisting, turning, rushing, carrying, being distracted. All of these things play a big role. M is maintenance, so that's about predominantly wear and tear, change of use, and then cleaning, which is a big challenge around slips in particular. E is environment, so yes, the weather, but also the built environment. So one of the big areas here is entrance matting. We get a lot of people say, oh, well, I've got an entrance mat. Well, yes, you do, but it's 50 centimeters deep. That's not going to dry people's feet off properly. And S is surface, which is the floor. So we look at it kind of holistically across those 6 areas. And what we tend to find is if I get called into an organization and they're struggling, they're normally looking at maybe 1 or 2 of the 6 areas, and even then fairly superficially. Whereas when we work with people who are doing a good job and not having many issues, it's because they're doing something in all 6 areas. So it's then about going from good to great, which is obviously a much better position to be in.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's quite an interesting methodology, because I remember when I used to manage buildings and sites, and it was all, and we were just so fastidious about wet floor signs, but it's just part of
the sign
the issue, isn't it? The signage.
A sign is a symptom, I would say. So the most high profile slip accident case in the UK was probably one which involved the Co-op in 2015, where a gentleman called Stanley May was in the store, and there was a leaking chiller and a puddle of water on the floor, and there's a yellow sign put out. I sometimes share some CCTV footage of this incident, and it's unquestionable that a sign was there. But sadly, the sign didn't stop him from slipping. Even more sadly, it didn't stop him from banging the back of his head and actually dying as a result. And it didn't stop the Co-op being criminally prosecuted. So people often put the sign out and think the sign protects us, the sign covers us. And that's an example of where actually the sign isn't solving the problem that you think it is. You absolutely should use signs when you're proactively cleaning, and you absolutely should use signs when you're dealing with a temporary spill. But what you shouldn't do is plonk the sign out when there's a spillage and just think, oh, that's okay because the sign's there. You need to dry that floor, and then you remove the sign because the risk is gone. And you absolutely shouldn't just be plonking signs out in your entrance area on a wet day and thinking, well, it's okay if someone slips because the sign's there, because it's foreseeable that the floor is going to get wet. And therefore, you should either be making the floor safe to walk upon when it's wet, or if it's not safe when it's wet, you should be preventing people from walking on it when it's wet. So you either need to dry the floor or barrier it off or something, but putting the sign out just isn't good enough. And sadly, as you said, people just think, oh, I'll put the sign out and that'll be okay, and that isn't the case. So a lot of the education that we do is about questions like that. So don't just rely on the signs.
Yeah, that's a good point. While you were talking, I was just thinking about facility managers that look after buildings. They do their walk rounds, do their inspections. What's something that you can share with them today that can, what sort of things should they be looking for? How would they recognize whether they need to engage with you just for some support or some guidance, or to introduce a regime that's going to help improve their workplace?
I remember once listening to a marketing podcast, and it was talking with somebody who had done some work with a clinic, a sort of a therapy clinic, and they did a billboard, and it said, "If you think you might need therapy, you probably do." And apparently that advertising campaign sort of went through the roof with the number of inquiries they got, because it just got people to think a bit. And I'd say the same applies. So if you think you might have a risk with slips, trips and falls, you probably do, is the first thing I would say. In terms of something actionable that people could do, I mentioned that Chimes model, the 6 reasons people slip. We've got a free online self-assessment tool that you can use. where you can answer questions. It takes about 3 minutes. You can answer a series of questions, and it will then give you a score for each of those areas of chimes, and an overall score. So just by taking that 3 minutes or so, you'll be able to see, right, A, how does my risk profile look? And B, where do I have the kind of strongest performance, or potentially the areas to improve? So I definitely encourage people to give that a go. As I say, if you think you might have a risk that you probably do, here's a free resource you can use to sort of quantify that risk a bit better. And then off the back of that, if you'd like to have a chat and see if there's anything we can do to help, then obviously happy to do that.
Can you share that, and I'll circulate that after?
Yeah. I'll pop it. I'll pop it over to you in an email. I mean, it's quite easy. It's scorecard.slipsafety.co.uk is the URL, but we can share the link as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So let's just talk about the future and the vision now. Where do you see the business in the next 5 years? What's your ideal scenario in terms of slip safety?
So we look at it from the perspective of how much impact are we making. In other words, how many floors, how many people are we keeping safe? And then obviously we can look at it from the perspective of how big are we, or how much are we selling, or whatever. So it's probably easier to answer in the second sense, because that's something that people can kind of visualize a bit more. But our view is the impact is a leading indicator for the sales and the growth of the business. So the more impact we can make, then obviously we'll get to where we want to be. The size of the problem that we help to address is in the billions. So but we're still relatively small at the moment. We'd like to be in a position within 5 years where we have a much larger footprint in terms of headcount, and I believe in 5 years we should be sort of upwards of £5 million of turnover. Is kind of where we would want to be in the business from a headline perspective.
Yeah. How have you been impacted by sustainability and climate, the climate conversation that's happening, and the trends that are happening now?
So I think that's a real positive for anybody involved in well-being and safety, because I think that kind of overarching ESG agenda is one that is forcing people to, at an organizational level, to kind of look in the mirror and question how well are we doing on these areas. And obviously safety and well-being falls under ESG. I think there's probably within ESG been a bit of an overemphasis on environment so far, and I think there's a bit of rebalancing that's needed. But anything that makes people at a senior level in organizations think about the sustainability of safety, health, environmental well-being, to me is a very good thing. And I think that sort of helps to raise the water level. If a rising tide raises all ships, it's that kind of thing. There's definitely something around wanting to be the employer of choice when it comes to well-being, and I think safety fits within that. So if you can be as safe as you possibly can be as an organization, that will drive a feeling of being protected. That's going to therefore lead to higher performance. That's going to give you more profit, and then you've got the power to move your organization onto a higher purpose. That's a kind of 5P sort of thing that I talk about quite a lot. And so to me, all of these things are positives. It's about actually just getting that balance right, and avoiding kind of overstepping into the sort of greenwashing sort of space in that area in particular.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, Christian, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received as an entrepreneur?
Can I swear, or do I need to keep it clean?
Yes, you can. Well, yes, you can. Just be yourself.
So one of my investors. One of my investors said to me, basically around how we can grow the business. He said two things. Firstly, so I'm going to give you two bits. Firstly, he said you've just got to be always looking out for what's the blocker, what's stopping us from making that progress, what's stopping us from getting to the next level. So that's the first thing. But in the same point, he said the other thing we've got to remember is if we keep fucking things up, eventually we'll run out of ways to fuck up and we'll get it right. so I think just keep trying, keep iterating, have that resilience, and just learn from your mistakes, because we have to make mistakes to progress and to move forward. And don't feel bad about things that haven't gone right. Just learn that lesson and keep pushing on.
Keep moving forward. That's some really good advice. And for budding entrepreneurs, what would you say to them? What words of wisdom would you give to them?
I would say definitely give it a go. I've done entrepreneurial things throughout my life, to be honest, and it's been great fun and inspiring. Be mindful of the fact, like we just said, that things won't necessarily work out well, but you can learn so much through the process. I'd certainly encourage people to try and find some kind of mentors. So I know, like Daniel Priestley, I don't know if you've had him on, but talking about KPI, he says, if you want to be an entrepreneur, go and work for an entrepreneur for a couple of years and kind of learn from them. I think that would be really good advice. I didn't really do that, but I think that would be really good advice to people. And then one thing I'd say to entrepreneurs and all businesses is, don't forget the old adage of, sales turnover is vanity, cash is sanity. You've got to be on top of the numbers and keep a sustainable financial footing.
Yeah. Thank you. So we mentioned about well-being earlier. So how do you maintain your work-life balance as an entrepreneur?
Pretty poorly. If I'm honest, I need to do better at that. I'm quite good at. So one thing I am good at is I know myself, and so you wake up some days and you just know it's not a good day. You're not going to be very productive. So I've been quite good at recognizing that within myself, and then either deciding to do something on that day where I can do more kind of functional stuff, so I don't need to be inspired and thinking, or even just actually taking myself away and going for a walk for an hour and clearing my head a bit, or going and playing snooker or something. Snooker is my kind of pastime that I enjoy. So obviously all that has to be done in moderation and in balance. But I think having that awareness and being able to act on that is something that is really positive, and I'd recommend people try and do that as much as they can. But that's something that I definitely do. I've got better and better at switching off when we have holidays. So I remember being on holiday, planning our wedding and looking at wedding venues, and I was like glued to my phone doing stuff on calls and trying to solve problems, and which is ridiculous. Sounds ridiculous now. Whereas, as I say, we just got back from a trip to Lapland. I did take my laptop because we used it to watch some Netflix in the evenings and stuff, but I didn't log on to my laptop and do emails and things like that at all during that trip. So I have been a bit better at that.
Yes.
Where I'm lacking is the sort of fitness bit. So I used to be quite into the gym. I've got this kind of personality where I feel like it's not worth going to the gym unless I can dedicate the right amount of time to go to the gym to like really do it properly and track my progress and feel as if I'm improving. And so that's a bit of a mental block that I've got to get over. So could do a bit more on my health and fitness.
That's some really sound advice there. And as entrepreneurs, we always do tend, I feel, you just tend to just keep going and keep going and keep going, and then not think about, okay, the burnout or something there's going to be a consequence if you don't put certain measures in place. So recognizing those things in yourself is really good. Okay, so just tell us, are there any plans to diversify or expand beyond your current niche?
So within the business itself, I think we've just got so much opportunity to grow, and we're just really scratching the surface. So I don't think so, because I think that if we tried to expand too broadly, then we'd lose some focus, which I think would be a mistake. I have been doing a few other little things. on the side. So because of some of that work we talked about around building up my profile and sales and marketing and stuff, I was getting approached by other businesses in the safety or facilities management space, business owners saying, "Oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that?"
Yeah.
So about 18 months ago, I started doing a little bit of coaching of business owners that wanted to improve their sales effectively, to be blunt. So, get higher, faster, more predictable sales by improving the way that they do their sales and marketing. So I am doing that and expanding on that a little bit. I've just actually launched a new kind of iteration of that, where I've created more like a mastermind sort of type situation with an online community and a training portal and things like that. So I am doing some little side projects there. The other thing that is on the agenda, we were talking about this before we started recording and went live, was a book. So I know you're a lot further along than me. I've sort of done, 60-70% of a book. So I need to try and get that across the line as well. So get into that authoring space.
Do you know something though, Christian? I mean, my book's only just gone to the publishers, but to put it into context, I started writing it in December 2020. So it's when the time is right, then that'll come as well. Yeah, and I'm really excited about what you're going to have to share there. Is there a book, podcast, or resource that's been particularly influential for you?
So many, really. I suppose within the sort of safety space, there's a bit of a dearth of people doing content. So that's one of the reasons I've been able to stand out, is because I'm one of the few people doing it. But outside of that, I really love autobiographies, and I love the kind of what my wife calls self-help books. So in terms of autobiographies, I'd highly recommend the Warren Buffett one. I know it's not technically an autobiography, but he sort of co-authored it, called The Snowball. That was really inspiring to see his journey and how he kind of got to where he is, and how actually he does a lot of that by keeping things very simple, which I think is a really important message. What about some other things? Podcasts at the moment, I love The Rest is Politics. So nothing to do with work, but just to kind of keep me inspired and interested by people that have done great things. Books, certainly recommend Daniel Priestley's books, Become a Key Person of Influence, Oversubscribed. Those are really good books if you're interested in kind of raising your profile and building a good business.
Thank you for those recommendations. Let's just talk a bit about technology. You mentioned that you've incorporated some technology into the business. So how does that actually help customers or people that are interested in using your services?
So what we've really done is try to make what we can do a little bit more scalable and just improve and increase the impact. So the digital assessment I mentioned is one example of that. We also created, in partnership with a large insurance company, an online portal, which has tools, training, tracking, and resources all around that Chimes model, so that rather than us physically having to go in to a building and do the full extent of work and support that we can offer, which is going to have the impact, like I said earlier, of halving or more than halving their incident rates. We wanted to come up with something that we could do at a much bigger scale, that we couldn't promise is going to halve their incident rates, but actually, if we could make a 5 or 10% improvement across 1,000 sites, that actually, the cumulative effect of that is bigger than making a 50% improvement across 10 sites, let's say. So that's kind of what we've done, is just try to come up with a way of scaling up the impact using those digital kind of assets that are that transcend time and use, and just trying to help more and more people, really.
That's great. So Christian, how can our audience and people that are interested in your services contact you? What's the best way?
So probably the best thing to do is give me a follow on LinkedIn and hit connect. I pretty much will accept not anybody, because I get a lot of podcast promotion people trying to connect with me, and people trying to sell me all sorts of scams. But if you hit a connect and say, "Oh, I saw you with Maxine," then I'd be delighted to connect on there. You can then see what I'm up to, and then all the resources you need, including the scorecard. You can find there, and if there's something that we can help with, then just drop me a message on there, and we can have a chat.
That's great. And then what have you got coming up in terms? You said that there's some Zoom, some broadcasting that you do as well around slip safety services. So what have you got coming up? Have you got any webinars coming up or events that we can share, that we can promote?
Yep. So every other Wednesday, I run what I call a safety roundtable. So that's a Zoom session, which is 12:30 on a Wednesday, interactive Zoom. We normally have between 30 and 150, depending on the topic, safety professionals, or not all safety professionals, predominantly safety professionals. And we talk about, different topics from slips and trips to safety culture to insurance and risk management. And we kind of go through different things and try and start a conversation around the broad topic of safety and risk. So that's something that's always on the agenda. I've got a podcast as well called Safety and Risk Success, which comes out every week, and we interview people, along that full breadth of expertise as well. This week, there's going to be part 2 of an episode. Well, it's the second episode, actually, because it's such a long conversation with a guy called Simon Cassin, who's he's a safety professional, but he's an expert in ethics. He's done a dissertation on ethics, and we have a really interesting conversation about, is it ethical to aim for zero harm when it comes to safety?
That's an interesting debate. Where can we find your podcast? Can you, in fact, I think after we finish,
I'll send you the links.
Details, and then I can actually share that with the audience.
Yeah. But it's on all the, it's on all the, if Spotify, Apple, all those places you can find it. It's called Safety and Risk Success.
Safety and Risk Success. I made a note of that. That's brilliant, Christian. We're at the top of our time. Have you got any last words that you'd want to share with us before we end the show?
Well, hopefully it's been interesting. Thank you very much, Maxine, and keep up the great work. I'd definitely like to say that. I think it's really great to shine the spotlight on other people and learn. And so hopefully people have got something from this that they can take away, and it'll inspire them in some way, educate them in some way, and energize them in some way, because that's the tagline of the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for listening. And for those that will be listening to the recording later, enjoy. Christian is available for appointments. He's available to share his methodology around slips, trips and falls. In the workplace, it is a very, very important topic that we need to shine a light on, which we have done today, and to help FMs and industry professionals just improve safety in this area. Christian, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Maxine.
Next time. Take care.
Cheers.